Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing yet another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2019, directed by J.D. Dillard, and this film is called Sweetheart. So Sweetheart is about this young woman. She's been washed up ashore on this mysterious island. She's got a life jacket on, so it's obvious that she was out at sea for whatever reason, and she has now found herself stranded. So she doesn't know how she's going to get off this island, but she thinks that she's alone, but unfortunately when nightfall approaches, she's hearing things in the jungle on this island that indicates that maybe she's not alone. So on one hand she has to try and get off the island, but on the other hand she's going to have to try and fight off this impending terror that is about to cause havoc and put her life in danger. So whether or not she can is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Sweetheart. I didn't really hear too much about this movie, but when I saw the trailer I was definitely intrigued and I was sold. I thought I definitely want to go and check this movie out, because I thought as though if it played all of its cards right, it could have been a memorable experience. Now this is a low budget horror film, and I'd usually put low budget horror films into two categories. Category A is the successful low budget horror film. Now what I mean by that is that it's a movie that is self-aware of its limitations on a budget and its limitations on characters and settings. Then you've got Category B, which is everything against Category A. There's no self-awareness, it tries things that are way too extravagant, and it really takes you out of the moment. So those are the two categories I put independent movies in. Is that mainstream tend to get away with that a little bit more because they have the money to do the special effects, you know, and the makeup effects and everything like that, but low budget really have to play it a lot smarter. And so I didn't know what category I was going to put this movie in, but I was hoping that it was going to be Category A, and it was going to be a movie that I was going to be really excited about, and I couldn't wait to recommend to you all. But unfortunately, Sweetheart is definitely a film that falls into Category B, and it really kills itself through the lack of awareness. Now, the most disappointing aspect of Sweetheart is that it is very well made as far as cinematography is concerned, and it's the first 20 minutes of this movie I thought were absolutely fantastic. Now, this is a minimalistic horror film. This is a movie that does have one setting, and for the majority of the film has one character. And I thought the first 20 minutes was all about a situational horror film. It was all about putting yourself into the shoes of this stranded woman. And it's an age-old saying, what would you do if you were stranded on an island and no one knew you were there? That's a terrifying thought, and the first 20 minutes play on that terror very well. It intensifies it through a lot of psychology, the psychological battleground that is this island. The island is beautiful, but at the same time the isolation creates a strong sense of psychological terror. And then when the nightfall approaches, some of the night scenes in the first 20 minutes were very, very chillingly effective, because all you could hear was sounds, and you didn't know what's in the jungle. And because you don't know what's in the jungle, you don't know whether or not it's the mind tricks, it's the psychological sort of torment that this woman is facing, the trauma that she's facing through her situation, or is something terrifying hiding in there. And because there's a lot of grey area in that sort of questioning whether or not you're alone, it brings a sense of no control, and no control ultimately makes a horror film work. Is that if you have control, if you know what you're up against, therefore you can fight against it, you can prepare for it. And because you can prepare for it, you're bracing for impact. You know that it's not going to be very good. But when you don't know what you're up against, that to me, that sense of no control in the first 20 minutes really made this movie promise something that it just doesn't deliver. Now, I thought the acting from the main character, being just basically for the majority of the film, a one character film, I thought she didn't have a lot to say. So it was all based on her body language and the way she reacted to certain things. I thought, all right, well, this is something that I could get into. But having said that, because it is a low budget horror film, because it's a horror film that only goes for 75 minutes, it's not a film about relating to someone. So you just need a character there that's authentic enough to actually allow you to put yourself into the shoes of this person. And it's basically allowing you to say to yourself, what would you do in this situation? So it's a situational horror film. But then after the first 20 minutes, it steers away from that situational horror film, and it's trying to be a horror film that's a little bit too extravagant for its own good. Now, that does come in the way that it tells you what's out there in the jungle, and when you know what's out in the jungle, all the psychological torment has been drained away. And it does go down a standard sort of horror film, but unfortunately, because it doesn't realise its limitations as far as a budget is concerned, when you actually see the danger, it looks comical. And because that danger looks comical, again, you disconnect yourself because you just don't feel that scared. And I thought it was so much better when you didn't see what's happening. This is definitely a case of seeing less is best. But because the director doesn't realise this, this is where the lack of self-awareness really does play a very negative effect. And unfortunately, it's not only seeing what the danger is that's the negative effect, it's also in the characters that are about to come into this film. Because I didn't really relate to this character as far as a human is concerned, I could just relate to her because I'm just terrified to think what I would do in a situation. The movie tries to give you an insight into what this character is about, but it's never that interesting because it doesn't have time to go into details. It's only 75 minutes. And so it gives you a brief sort of analysis of this character, and these other characters come into the movie that are equally as boring. And I thought, all right, well, does this movie want to be a film about a psychological study of people who are stranded in a very high pressure situation, or does it want to be a fun creature feature sort of stranded, lost movie? And so it doesn't know what it wants to do, and so it does things in a way that are just not interesting at all because it's trying to juggle too much within a short period of time. So it doesn't want to be a psychologically tormenting film, doesn't want to be a standard sort of creature feature film, or doesn't want to be a movie about a psychological character studies of people put under extreme situations. But none of these sort of areas are done in a way where I thought as though the potential was realised. And so it didn't go in there with a strong plan. I thought it would have been a lot better if it just used the sense of psychology as opposed to actually seeing something, because when you see what's going on, this is where the lack of budget really does come into play, and that's unfortunately why I just didn't enjoy this movie at all, and I just come away from it bitterly disappointed because the first 20 minutes promises a film that just doesn't eventuate at the end. And so by the halfway stage of this movie, I thought as though it was dragging. I thought I'd completely disconnect myself from what was going on. I was looking at my watch, and for a 75-minute film, it does take some skill to actually make a 75-minute film boring. And that's exactly what I think this director did, and therefore this film is definitely a disposable horror film. Not the worst horror film you'll ever see, but it should have been so much better if it had the self-awareness, which unfortunately a lot of these lower budget horror films just don't possess. So overall for Sweetheart, it tries to be extravagant, but unfortunately it falls flat. I'm only going to give this one 1.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.